He can do anything. That's what they said about Diego Maradona after he tore through England's defence in 1986. But Kenny Sansom, the man tasked with stopping him, faced plenty of nightmares long before that afternoon in Mexico City. 8 consecutive PFA Team of the Year selections, 86 England caps, a record that stood for years as England's most capped fullback. Kenny Sansom was the thinking man's defender, the cultured left-back who read the game like few others. Yet even legends have their limits. Today, we're counting down the 5 players who pushed Sansom beyond his, and one of them isn't even a global superstar, but he made Sansom's life absolutely miserable. To understand who troubled Kenny Sansom, you first need to understand how he played. This wasn't your typical British defender from the 1980s. Sansom didn't launch into sliding tackles or rely on physical intimidation. The Arsenal faithful called him Kenny Whiteshorts because his kit stayed clean all match. He succeeded through timely interceptions, waiting for opponents to overrun the ball by just a fraction before nicking it away. He played more like a continental fullback, all intelligence and positioning. His left foot was described as great, his passing exceptional, and, crucially, he never gave the ball away. This tactical brilliance earned him that unprecedented 8 straight years in the PFA Team of the Year. No fullback has matched that since. But every strength has its weakness. Sansom thrived against tricky, skillful players because they gave him time to read their intentions. He could anticipate their feints, predict their next move, and intercept at the perfect moment. The problem came when opponents refused to play his game, when they stripped away the time he needed to think, when they forced him into something his entire philosophy rejected, a straight-foot race. That's when things got uncomfortable. Diego Maradona sits at the top of this list, and honestly, it's not even close. This is the player who made the world's best defenders look ordinary. For Sansom, the nightmare began earlier than most people remember. In 1980, England hosted Argentina at Wembley for a friendly. Maradona was just 19 years old, but already he was something different. Sansom drew the assignment of marking him. It didn't go well. Sansom conceded a penalty after fouling the Argentine forward. After the match, Sansom gave an assessment that was shockingly humble for a defender entering his prime. He admitted that Maradona had a marginally better game than he did. Then he went further. He called Maradona so clever and amazing and said he did not make a single mistake. For a player whose entire reputation was built on minimising errors and executing perfect defensive timing, admitting an opponent played without flaw was remarkable. Even at 19, Maradona operated outside normal defensive logic. 6 years later came the match that cemented Maradona's legend, the 1986 World Cup quarter-final in Mexico City, England against Argentina. Sansom was there again, part of the defensive line tasked with stopping the world's most dangerous player. We all know what happened next. The hand of God goal sparked controversy, but it was the second goal that truly defined Maradona's genius. He collected the ball in his own half and began one of football's most famous solo runs. 5 English players tried to stop him. All 5 failed. As Maradona approached the final defensive line, everything that made Sansom great became irrelevant. Sansom's characteristic move, waiting for the attacker to overrun the ball, was impossible against someone with such absolute control. Maradona's low centre of gravity, incredible balance, and rapid footwork in tight spaces gave Sansom nothing to read. The Argentine burst past Kenny Sansom and Phil Neal as if they weren't there. For a defender universally praised for his tactical intelligence, being bypassed so effortlessly proved that Maradona simply transcended possibility. You couldn't plan for genius. You could only watch it unfold. So out of these names, who do you think was the hardest to defend against in the 80s? Drop your pick below and make sure you're subscribed. We've got more stories from football's golden years coming, and you won't want to miss them. While Maradona provided singular, historic humiliation, the toughest opponents are often the ones you face week after week, the ones who test you in brutal domestic battles when titles are on the line. For Kenny Sansom, no one fit that description better than John Barnes. The Liverpool winger represented perhaps the greatest sustained threat Sansom faced during the 1980s. And the reason was simple. Barnes combined everything Sansom struggled with into one devastating package. Barnes was technically excellent, strong, quick, a great dribbler with tremendous football knowledge. Think about that combination for a second. Unlike pure tricksters who relied solely on skill, Barnes possessed blistering pace. That's the attribute Chris Waddle later identified as Sansom's Achilles heel. Barnes could choose his weapon. He could dance around you with technical brilliance, which Sansom could defend, or he could simply blow past you with raw speed, forcing Sansom into the uncomfortable foot race that negated all his intelligence. What made Barnes especially dangerous was his football intelligence. He didn't just rely on physical gifts. He understood when to use pace and when to use skill. He could read Sansom's positioning and exploit it. In tight spaces near the touchline, Barnes had the strength to hold off challenges while maintaining perfect ball control. In open field, he had the acceleration to leave defenders trailing. This versatility meant Sansom could never settle into a rhythm or anticipate what was coming next. The ability to switch seamlessly between these attacking modes, coupled with Barnes's physical strength, created an unpredictable nightmare. In the intense Arsenal versus Liverpool rivalry of that era, Sansom faced Barnes multiple times each season. Crucial league games, high-stakes cup ties. Every single time, Sansom could never fully relax, never fully anticipate what was coming. Barnes earned the respect too. He once included Sansom in his best 11, acknowledging the battles they'd fought. But respect doesn't make someone easier to face. Barnes was the perfect domestic storm, speed meeting technical quality at the absolute highest level. And if Barnes showed what happened when speed met skill, Franz Carr showed what pure speed alone could do. Now, Carr isn't a household name like the others on this list. He didn't win Ballon d'Ors or inspire documentaries. But for Kenny Sansom, Franz Carr represented a very specific kind of nightmare. Chris Waddle put it perfectly when discussing Sansom's weaknesses. He said Sansom never liked playing against people who wanted to just race him. People like Franz Carr. That one sentence tells you everything. Carr played for Nottingham Forest and was renowned for one thing above all else: explosive, blistering pace. His entire tactical purpose was vertical movement. Force the fullback to chase you toward the touchline or goal. Strip away their control. Create defensive errors through physical speed rather than complex trickery. For Sansom, this was torture. Everything he'd built his career on became useless. He couldn't read Carr's body language because there was nothing to read. Carr wasn't trying to fool him with feints or skill moves. He was just running, and running fast. The rapid acceleration nullified the time Sansom needed to apply his intelligence. It forced him into reactionary defending, which was his greatest weakness. The mental stress of abandoning your entire philosophy, of being dragged into a mode of play that contradicts everything you're good at. That's what made Carr so tough. He might not have been the best overall player Sansom faced, but by definition, he was one of the hardest tests because he forced Sansom to play a completely different game. Trevor Steven rounds out the domestic challenges, and he brings something different to the conversation. Steven wasn't about flash or pure speed. He represented the challenge of sustained excellence and tactical discipline. As the right-sided midfielder for Howard Kendall's dominant Everton side, Steven faced Sansom in some of the decade's most important matches. Everton were Arsenal's major domestic rivals during Sansom's peak years. These weren't friendly kick-arounds. These were title deciders and cup battles where every mistake mattered. Steven was supremely efficient. He consistently delivered high-quality crosses and possessed a tremendous work rate. That meant Sansom had to maintain absolute positional discipline for 90 full minutes. There was no rest, no lapses in concentration allowed. Steven's relentless movement and precise delivery ensured Sansom was constantly engaged, constantly tested. This wasn't about surviving a moment of brilliance or a burst of speed. This was about fundamental defensive soundness sustained over an entire match against one of the era's most reliable attacking threats. Steven forced Sansom to be perfect. Game after game, season after season. That kind of consistent pressure, that unrelenting demand for excellence, makes someone incredibly tough to face. The final name on this list represents the international dimension of Sansom's career. With 86 England caps, Sansom faced the world's best attackers on the biggest stages. Beyond Maradona, one name stands out as the perfect example of elite continental craft. Pierre Littbarski, the West German winger, played vital roles in 2 World Cup finals, the tournaments in 1982 and 1986, where Sansom started at left-back for England. Littbarski's style was defined by rapid, agile movements and exceptional close control. Quick and nimble, exactly the type of opponent that troubled defenders consistently. But what made Littbarski particularly challenging wasn't just his individual talent. It was how perfectly that talent integrated into West Germany's broader strategy. Facing Littbarski meant confronting a highly organised, efficient attacking machine, where individual flair served a disciplined team structure. Sansom had to contend not only with a skilled player, but with the systematic approach of one of the world's best national teams. Littbarski provided the perfect contrast to Maradona. Where Maradona excelled through individual chaotic brilliance, Littbarski represented the refined, technical, fast-paced European winger operating within a cohesive system. His presence ensured Sansom faced every dimension of attacking talent on the global stage. Pure genius, hybrid threats, speed merchants, and now surgical precision within structure. Look at these 5 names together, and you see something remarkable. Maradona, the undisputed genius who transcended all defensive strategy. Barnes, the perfect hybrid of speed, power and skill who dominated domestic football. Carr, the pure speed nightmare who stripped away Sansom's greatest strengths. Stephen, the relentless professional who demanded perfection through sustained discipline. Littbarski, the nimble architect who brought continental sophistication to the international stage. They represent a complete taxonomy of toughness, every possible way an attacker can challenge a defender. And here's what's incredible. Kenny Sansom faced all of them and still built a legendary career. His 8 consecutive PFA Team of the Year selections weren't accidents. They were earned through battles against exactly these kinds of players. Did Maradona beat him? Absolutely. Did Carr make him uncomfortable? Without question. But Sansom's greatness wasn't about never being beaten. It was about adaptability, about finding ways to succeed against the full spectrum of attacking talent the 1980s could throw at him. His longevity at the highest level, his consistency season after season, proved he could minimise even these extraordinary threats over the course of his career. Chris Waddle, himself an immensely skillful player, called Sansom the best defender he ever faced in England. Think about that. The players who troubled Sansom most still respected him as elite. That mutual respect demonstrates something profound. These weren't battles of physical attrition or dirty tactics. Sansom wasn't physical. He didn't use shock tactics or brutal challenges. These were battles of intellect, speed, and technical mastery. Every duel was a chess match played at full sprint, and in the vast majority of those duels, Sansom's intelligence and cultured approach won out. The 5 players who pushed him hardest became part of his legend rather than diminishing it. They defined the standard he had to meet. They forced him to evolve, to find new solutions, to prove his brilliance against every possible attacking style. Maradona showed him the limits of human defensive capability. Barnes demanded he face both speed and skill simultaneously. Carr exposed the vulnerability of overthinking. Stephen required relentless concentration. Littbarski brought international sophistication to the equation. And through it all, Kenny Sansom maintained his position as one of English football's greatest fullbacks. His legacy extends beyond statistics and trophies. Sansom established the blueprint for the modern attacking defender. But his true genius was defensive, the cultured approach, the timing, the anticipation, the refusal to dive into reckless tackles, playing more like a continental fullback in an era when English football celebrated physical aggression. That choice, That commitment to intelligence over brutality set the standard for what the fullback position could become. Every modern defender who relies on positioning over physicality, who reads the game before reacting, owes something to Kenny Sansom's approach. Kenny Sansom's legacy proves that true greatness isn't about never being beaten. It's about how you handle facing the best players in the world. It's about consistency when genius tries to embarrass you, adaptability when speed strips away your advantages, and discipline when excellence demands perfection. If you enjoyed this look into football's fiercest battles, hit like and subscribe, and tell us which legend deserves a deep dive next. Because the stories from football's golden era aren't just about who won, they're about the battles that made legends on both sides of the ball.